For most of his life, Ryan Meltchure lived with a silence that wasn't chosen lightly. It wasn't the silence of indifference, nor the absence of emotion. It was the kind that forms when speaking feels risky, when telling the truth might reopen wounds that never had time to heal. Ryan grew up carrying a story that didn't fit easily into public narratives or family conversations. He was connected to someone admired across the world, yet over time that connection became distant in ways he couldn't explain or control. This story is not about scandal or blame. It's about how distance forms quietly, how family ties can weaken without anyone openly ending them, and how silence can shape a life just as powerfully as conflict. Ryan Meltchure was not simply related to a famous figure. Doris Day was his grandmother, and in his early years she was a constant presence in his life. He spent time with her regularly, shared routines, and felt protected by her warmth. To him, she was a Hollywood legend or an icon frozen in time. She was someone familiar, someone who offered stability during childhood. That closeness wasn't imaginary or exaggerated. It was real, lived, and deeply personal. As Ryan grew older, however, that bond slowly changed. Not through one clear event, but through a series of shifts that made access more complicated and communication less certain. The first major change came after his parents' divorce, something Ryan describes as overwhelming, especially because he was still underage at the time. Divorce doesn't just separate spouses. It reshapes entire family systems. Loyalties become fragile, communication narrows, and children often absorb confusion without explanation. Despite these changes, Ryan says his relationship with his grandmother continued for years. The emotional thread remained intact. What truly altered the dynamic was the death of his father, Terry Meltchure, in 2004. Terry had been more than a parent. He was the bridge that kept family relationships steady and familiar. When Terry passed away after battling melanoma, the loss extended beyond grief. Ryan lost the person who connected him naturally to his grandmother. In the weeks following the funeral, Doris Day reached out personally and invited Ryan to dinner. According to Ryan, both were looking forward to reconnecting. It felt like a moment of comfort in a period already shaped by loss. That dinner never happened. Instead, Ryan was asked to meet Doris's business manager at the Cypress Inn in Carmel, a place Doris trusted and co-owned. What Ryan expected to be a simple discussion became something that changed everything. During that meeting, Ryan was asked a question that stunned him. Why do you want to see Doris? For Ryan, the question itself felt disorienting. The answer seemed obvious to him. She was his grandmother. But the response he received was unexpected. He was told he would not be allowed to see her. The explanation given was not about health, safety, or Doris's wishes. It was tied to family history and past divorce. From that moment forward, communication faded. Phone calls went unanswered. Visits never happened. No argument followed. There was simply silence, reinforced over time. As years passed, physical distance followed emotional distance. Security increased around Doris's home. Access became controlled and formal. What had once been natural became impossible without permission. Ryan did not force his way in or publicly challenge the situation. He was young, grieving, and unsure. Like many people in similar positions, he trusted what authority figures told him. He questioned himself instead of the system around him. That self-doubt lingered for years. Silence became normal, even though it carried emotional weight. To understand how this separation lasted, it helps to understand Doris Day's life beyond her public image. Long before her later years in Carmel, Doris had learned to survive by avoiding conflict. Her first marriage began when she was very young and quickly became abusive. She later spoke about learning how to stay calm, how to de-escalate, and how silence often felt safer than confrontation. Leaving that relationship saved her life, but the emotional lessons remained. Over time, silence became a protective instinct. Her later marriages reinforced that pattern in different ways. Control replaced violence, and trust replaced questioning. Her third husband, Martin Meltchure, managed her career and finances for years. Doris trusted him completely. She didn't monitor accounts or challenge decisions. When he died, she discovered that her fortune had been mismanaged and nearly lost. She was left not only financially vulnerable but emotionally shaken. Once again, trusting the wrong person had devastating consequences. That experience didn't make her confrontational. It made her more guarded and more private. By the time Doris stepped away from Hollywood, she had spent decades being directed, managed, and overridden by others. She learned that pushing back often came with consequences. Retreat felt safer. Privacy felt controlled. So when she entered old age, already deeply private and cautious, she depended on others to manage her world. That dependence didn't begin suddenly. It was the result of lifelong conditioning. Decisions about access, communication, and protection were often made on her behalf. Ryan did not grow up fully understanding this history. What he felt instead was confusion and guilt. He questioned whether insisting on contact would cause her stress. He worried about doing harm rather than good. He heard that her memory was declining. He feared that confrontation might hurt her more than distance ever could. In that way, his silence mirrored hers. Both believed that quiet was the kinder option, even when it came at a personal cost. In her later years, Doris Day lived quietly in Carmel Valley. She declined awards, refused tributes, and avoided interviews. To the public, this appeared to be a peaceful personal choice. She focused on animals, routine, and privacy. Neighbors described her as kind but withdrawn. Her world became smaller, shaped around what felt safe. As her circle narrowed, decision-making became centralized. Longtime associates were replaced. Changes happened quietly, without public explanation. Ryan continued living nearby, working in real estate, physically close but emotionally distant. He didn't challenge the barriers. He didn't arrive unannounced. Instead, he waited, hoping circumstances might change. They never did. When Doris passed away at home, the announcement came through official channels and social media. Ryan learned of her death the same way the public did. There was no private call, no family conversation, no goodbye. That moment confirmed that the separation had lasted until the very end. After her passing, Ryan faced a decision he had avoided for years. Staying silent no longer protected anyone. Within days, he shared a carefully written statement. It wasn't angry or accusatory. He praised Doris as a cultural icon and a loving grandmother in his early life. He described the closeness they once shared. Then, calmly, he explained what happened: being blocked from contact, being questioned, being told he could not see her. He acknowledged regret, but also explained why he stopped trying. Ryan's words resonated because they didn't sound bitter. They sounded human. He spoke about believing adults when they said certain things were for the best, about learning too late that silence can be enforced without explanation. Public reaction was mixed. Some defended Doris's privacy. Others questioned whether isolation should happen without transparency. Many were simply unsettled by the idea that kindness and control can coexist. Ryan never accused his grandmother of malice. He never claimed she didn't love him. His grief was directed at the system around her, not at her. He described her as generous, affectionate, and deeply shaped by survival. He wanted people to see Doris Day not as a saint or a victim, but as a human being shaped by decades of silence and endurance. What Ryan Meltchure ultimately points toward is not a single decision or moment, but a pattern that developed slowly over decades. Doris Day's life was shaped by repeated experiences where asserting herself came at a cost. From early abuse to later financial betrayal, she learned that trust could be dangerous, and that confrontation rarely brought peace. Over time, retreat became a form of self-preservation. In that context, isolation does not appear as a dramatic choice, but as a gradual narrowing of the world. Each boundary added felt reasonable, even protective. When age and vulnerability entered the picture, those boundaries hardened into systems that others controlled. Ryan does not argue that Doris intended harm or exclusion. Instead, he suggests that the habits which once protected her may have limited her ability to reassess who truly belonged in her life during its final chapter. Ryan's own silence followed a similar logic. He was not indifferent nor unaware. He was cautious. He feared becoming a source of stress in a life already reduced by age and fragility. Information reached him indirectly that Doris's memory was slipping, that disruption could be harmful, that peace was fragile. In those circumstances, pushing harder felt selfish. Choosing restraint felt loving. Only later did Ryan begin to recognize how easily concern can be shaped by external voices, and how silence, once accepted, becomes difficult to challenge. His story reflects a common human experience. When authority and emotion intersect, people often doubt themselves first. That doubt can last years, even decades, before clarity arrives. After Doris Day's passing, the world responded with celebration of her legacy. Her films, her music, her philanthropy were remembered fondly. These tributes were deserved. But for Ryan, the public response contrasted sharply with his private experience. Grief did not arrive with ceremony or closure. It arrived through a screen, without warning, without context. That moment crystallized years of emotional distance into a single realization. The separation had never been temporary. It had become permanent without anyone ever acknowledging it. Speaking afterward was not about reclaiming access or correcting history. It was about acknowledging loss in a way that had never been allowed while she was alive. Ryan's decision to share his story was careful and restrained. He did not frame himself as a victim, nor did he attempt to dismantle Doris Day's image. Instead, he presented her as a complex human being, generous, loving, cautious, shaped by survival. His account challenges the idea that kindness and control cannot coexist. It raises uncomfortable questions about how power operates quietly, especially around aging public figures. Privacy can be protection, but it can also become isolation when decisions are made without transparency. Ryan does not ask the public to choose sides. He asks them to consider how silence functions and who benefits from it. In the end, the question is not whether Doris Day chose isolation or whether isolation chose her. The reality likely exists somewhere in between. Human lives are rarely shaped by a single choice. They are shaped by patterns, fears, habits, and the systems built around them. Ryan Meltchure's story does not diminish Doris Day's legacy. It adds dimension to it. It reminds us that legends are still human, and that even lives filled with admiration can leave behind unfinished conversations. Some stories remain untold not because they are untrue, but because speaking them once felt unsafe. And sometimes, those stories only emerge when silence no longer serves anyone.